Glad to see you all here. Yes, my name is Mia, and I am a member of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice Group, and I'm a resident in Ward 3 near Lee Park. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I especially want to thank Sheila Webb, our Robbinsdale City Council Ward 2 candidate, for speaking with us today. The intention of this meeting is to allow for a space to talk about racial justice and equity issues as they pertain to our elected officials ahead of our primary election coming up on August 11th. Several members of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group have come up with a series of questions, and I have presented these questions to the candidate a couple of days ago. And we're here to listen and become better informed voters. And for those of us who are white members of the community, we're here to be better allies to our neighbors who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So with that said, as in all of our meetings, we will allow space for follow-up questions from the audience at the end, and white people will defer and listen to BIPOC members when they have something to say. And as you know, this meeting is recorded. You should be able to see a recording icon on your screen, and you'll notice that the audience microphones are off for now for the first part of our meeting, and then you'll be invited to ask follow-up questions via the chat later on, and I will open your microphone if you prefer. The meeting structure will be as follows. So in a moment, Ms. Webb will have 5 minutes for an introduction and opening statements. I will spend about 30 minutes asking the questions that we voted on, and then we'll take questions from you in the chat or over the microphone for about 15 minutes. And then finally, Sheila will have about 2 minutes for any closing statements, where we will then wrap up the meeting. Okay, so Sheila, thank you so much for being here. Will you now please introduce yourself and give us an opening statement?
Yes, my name is Sheila Webb. I am a resident of Robbinsdale, Ward 2. I've lived here for 6 years with my husband. All of our kids are adults. We have grandchildren. We have 8 of them, and they're in and out of here, trying to live here and there. I'm a social worker by trade, a school social worker, and I've been in the field of social services, human services, and social justice for over 24 years. And so I've worked for the Wilder Foundation. I've worked for Salvation Army Harbor Lights. I've worked for Simpson Housing Services. And currently I am the social worker at Minneapolis Public Schools, specifically Loring Elementary. The reason why I chose to run is because, basically because of my platform. I am completely and totally dedicated to equity and inclusion, foundation of diversity. I think it's very important that we have space that includes people, that make people feel welcomed, that people can be who they are and come as they are. I've been doing this work for a long time, and it just seems like we're at a point where I can't understand why we're continuing to do the work. I feel like we should be doing something else, but since we're still doing it, it made sense that I would take this route and go for the city council seat because of so many things I see in Robbinsdale that need support around equity and inclusion.
Wonderful, thank you. So for the next part of our meeting, as I mentioned, we'll be asking you a series of questions that the group has submitted and organized in advance. And again, for transparency's sake, these questions were presented to Sheila a few days ago. And by the way, any other candidate that's also meeting with this group in other Zoom calls, these same questions will be asked in the same order. So for now, I'll refrain from asking any follow-up questions at this time, but the chat is open to everyone. And Sheila, if you see any activity in the chat box that you want to address in real time, I know that's tricky from an iPhone too, so don't worry about it, we understand. But yes, please, feel free. So for any, also for time's sake, for any answers that exceed maybe 2 or 3 minutes, if it's okay, I will just kindly say 15 seconds, and ask you to summarize and wrap up so we can get to as many questions as possible today. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. So let's jump right in with our first question. What are some of the racial inequities that you identify in Robbinsdale, and what are the metrics that you would use to measure our progress in those areas?
Well, some of the inequities, well, mainly, there are no decision makers in at City Hall. So there's no diversity on the planning committee as far as Black, Brown, Indigenous people. The city council is not diverse. And I just think that if you're making decisions for a community, we should have a wealth of people representing. And so that's the number one thing I've identified as an inequity. When you think about the location where people live, it's not as diverse. Robbinsdale is not as diverse. I want to say Robbinsdale is maybe 81% white. And so some people might say that's an inequity. I don't know if it's an inequity, but it definitely feels like that for people of color when they're out in common spaces with their white neighbors.
Great, thank you. And what strategies will you use to increase racial equity in Robbinsdale if you're elected?
I think one of the things we can do, I would love to have focus groups and surveys, talking to the community about their experiences, how they feel about equity and inclusion and diversity, if they feel welcomed, if they feel a part. There are some changes, there are some subtle changes we can make. If we have bathrooms that are for male and female, maybe we can turn them into gender neutral bathrooms and just measure what progress have we made? What are we doing? What have we identified as something that needs to be addressed? And then go to a place where we can say, okay, we made progress on this item, or we made progress in this area or with this group. And so I think that would just take building some relationships with the community and having some spaces where we can talk about what's really going on.
That's great, thanks. My next question, have you done any personal work or learning on topics of racism? And if so, what nature?
Yes, I work for Minneapolis Public Schools, so we always had to attend trainings around race, equity, equality, inclusion. We also have groups at our school where we take a lead on positive school-wide engagement teams. I've led teams around equity and inclusion, specifically with children and with my colleagues. So I'm always trying to learn more about what that looks like, how helpful it can be not only to a school community, but to a community as a whole, with residents and business owners and local politicians and, people that make decision makers. And so I'm always taking trainings around equity and inclusion and diversity. It's almost mandatory.
Great, thank you. Now, a question about the RPD. How would you hold the Robbinsdale Police Department accountable if there were inappropriate or harmful actions?
I think we need a review board. I think we need someone to collaborate with the Robbinsdale Police Department in making sure that processes are being completed appropriately and with integrity. And so we've been talking about that as a Human Rights Commission, what that would look like to support the police, to support the community, to support people that live outside of Robbinsdale that have complained about interactions with police. And so I think having a review group, a review board would be a start, but definitely holding police accountable for any actions that are not within a guideline of causing least harm to people.
Excellent, love that. And my next question, what policy changes have you contributed to in support of racial justice and equity?
My voice, I'm always speaking up, speaking out. I'm going to sign any petition and be with any group that is about equity and inclusion on any platform in any city. I'm a supporter of equity and inclusion. I don't think any one of us has room not to be. And so I'm always at the table when I have an opportunity to be at the table, to talk about it, to support it, to be educated and to educate. So I may not be directly pushing legislation, but I'm definitely supporting it.
Great, thank you. What would be your first action as City Council to ensure Robbinsdale is starting down the path of working towards racial equity among our residents, businesses, and schools?
Well, community engagement is big for me because I think that there's a big disconnect from what the community knows and feel like they're involved with versus what the city is guiding. And I want to bring both together. Like, I want to bridge that gap. But more importantly, I want to make sure that my platform about equity, inclusion, and diversity does not get lost, and it's not just buzzwords and people feel like it's a trend that will pass, because it's not. It's something that we're going to continue to do work on, and we'll have to just keep pushing that agenda, keep pushing that platform. And I want to make sure that it's significant. I want to make sure that the City of Robbinsdale is taking it seriously, and that we're actually doing work with making sure that our city represents equity and inclusion in our policies and in our practices and just how we welcome people.
Great, thank you. Now, we are all familiar, at least I think most of us are familiar with your involvement with the Human Rights Commission. So my next question, how would you use the Robbinsdale Human Rights Commission as a resource?
First of all, I'd like to see the Human Rights Commission have more power in making decisions. I would also like to work with them. I think it would be nice if the Human Rights Commission could have two subgroups. One group where they work directly with the police and collaborating work with them and making sure that there is support and a network, but also making sure that they're also connected to the community and dealing with community relations. And so I think that would be a nice combination of support that the commission could offer in building their relationships with not only the community, but with the police, and maybe bridging the relationship and establishing relationships between the police and the community.
Great. So speaking of police, here's another question about RPD. Just in general, what other changes do you envision for the RPD?
Lots of training. Lots of training. I think training, it would be nice to have a diverse police force. It would be nice to see the police being more community involved, where it doesn't look so much like policing, but it looks like community engagement, getting to know the people that live in the different wards. You know, like it used to look with officer friendly, and the police and the community having a different visual of what the police look like versus what it looks like right now to not only adults, people of color specifically, but to children. You know, we're not the only one who is witnessing this trauma. Children are witnessing it too. And so the police have to make a commitment to do something to change their own image.
Absolutely, thank you. My next question, Sheila, do you have any contacts or community partnerships in Robbinsdale or in other local communities that you would use as resources to advance racial equity?
Currently, I am the secretary with the League of Women Voters for Crystal, New Hope, East Plymouth, and Robbinsdale. I think with that group, I would love for Robbinsdale to be more visible with hosting forums in our city and educating our community and maybe extended communities around voting and how important it is to vote on a local level. I think people get excited about voting for the president and voting for, vice president, but people don't understand how important it is and how beneficial it is for you to choose your local government. And so that's an inequity because so many people of color, so many people that live in for themselves, they're invisible, aren't in those spaces to learn about those processes. And I want that to change. I'm also on the board of directors with Seven Dreams Education Foundation. And they raise money to give grants to schools that are doing innovative projects and programming. And I think Robbinsdale city leaders have to have a presence at the school level. We need to be in the schools. We need to be supporting teachers. We need to be supporting students. We need to be supporting the work that different organizations are doing to enhance the educational programs within the Robbinsdale School District. I mean, the district is named after Robbinsdale. We should have, a profound presence in making sure that we are engaged, we are involved, and that we support.
Yes, thank you. My next question is a bit of a high-level question, but what is your #1 priority or goal as city council member?
My #1 priority and goal is to make sure that the community as a whole is heard. I want to get ideas from people about how we can make Robbinsdale a more inclusive, a more equitable city. But I also want to hear about the things that are going on unrelated to equity and inclusion. People may think, but maybe not. To hear how people feel about infrastructure, how they feel about accessibility to parks, accessibility of lakes, the functionality of the lakes. Are there stop signs needed in certain areas where there are none? Are the yield signs working in certain locations? I just want to hear the voices of the people. I want to hear what people are happy with, and I want to hear what people have complaints about. And so I just think bringing the voices directly to the council and to City Hall so that we can make sure that people are feeling heard. That's one of my #1 goals. I want to bridge that gap. As I meet people, I hear so many people don't know when a council meeting is. So many people didn't know that Van Rogan wasn't running for city council. And I just think that's a disconnect. And somehow we have to figure out how to get communication from City Hall to the community consistently.
Yes. Great, yes. And my next question, when should the City of Robbinsdale take the lead on social issues? And when should the city wait for action at the state or federal levels?
We should never wait. We should always start at the local level. You know how many magnificent things have started at the local level. I want to say marriage equality. I might be wrong, but I want to say marriage equality. There are a lot of things that started at the local level. I think women's suffrage. We don't have to wait. If we have a problem, we need to push it at the local level. Why are you in local government if we can't push it to you? Then you push it to state and federal government. I mean, I just think it's important for people to know. I don't think people know or understand how important their voices are. And I think that's because people don't feel like their voice means anything because usually their voices aren't being heard. But I don't think we should ever wait to push anything. I think we should always push on a local level. We can
Great.
see what happens, right?
Thank you. Yes. Okay, so just want to mention for anyone who has joined us partway through, again, thank you for being here. Sheila, I just have a couple more questions that we have prepared for you, and then in just a few minutes, we're going to open it up for follow-up questions. So for those in the audience, if you do have questions, you know, start thinking on those. You can type them in the chat at any time. Okay, so my next question, what is your vision for ensuring all Robbinsdale residents feel safe and free of harmful prejudices?
Number one, I want the city, right now I hear all the mayoral candidates talking about equity and inclusion, and that's great. For the most part, I think I've heard every last one of them talk about that. And I've also heard the city council candidates talk about it. My vision is that we're serious about this, and that we do the work, and that we don't do this to get votes, and that this is not going to go on like it's a trend. I really want people to be accountable for what they're saying. If you're saying you're going to do it, people are expecting you to do it. I want us to be a community where people feel comfortable. Not only our residents, but people that are visiting, people that are patronizing businesses. You know, we will get there. The beauty in diversity, equity, and inclusion is that everything is thriving when that happens. Children are thriving in school. Businesses are thriving because they're not just dependent on the people that live in that community. There are people outside of that community that are excited to go to their businesses because they feel welcome. They feel like, you know, this person, there's no discrimination. They're not looking at me crazy when I walk into this establishment. Everything is thriving when we put including people first, when we disrupt inequities. And that's the growth of disparities, is the increase of not looking at people in a humane way. Humanity is important. And for me, I just think just starting there, a lot of people think that my platform is not for them because I'm talking about diversity and equity and inclusion. But that is for everyone. Equity and inclusion, everyone should want that. Everyone should want diversity. I don't want to live in a world where everyone looks like me, eats like me, dresses like me. I don't want to be in a space where it's okay for me and people that look like me to be in that space, but other people to be excluded. And anywhere I go, I want to feel like I'm significant, I'm important, I'm valued, I am welcomed. That's important. That's what we all want.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think, you know, all of us can say that's why we're here too. So thank you for that. My next question, if elected, will you find it important to allocate city funds toward racial equity programs?
Most definitely. You know, I think that's one of the things we have to figure out. We have to figure funding out. We have to figure out where can we get funding? How can we do funding differently? I feel like we need a racial equity group. I can announce right here that I just been appointed to the racial equity group with Hennepin County. And so I think that not only should every county have one, but every city should have a group to work on racial equity, address those issues.
Great, and congratulations on your appointment. That's exciting.
Yeah,
okay, one more question for you, and then we'll move on to the follow-up questions. Do you feel that the city parks and recreation serve all residents living in Robbinsdale?
Can you repeat that?
Yes, do you feel that the city parks and recreation serve all residents living in Robbinsdale?
I'm going to say no. And the reason why I say that, even that's when you look at some of the parks look exclusive. They look like they're sitting in a location only for that neighborhood. And so when I think of parks, I think about all kids feeling the freedom and the joy to go to the nearest park or any park in their community. And I don't feel like parks are structured in that way, or even engaging or inviting in that way.
Great, thank you. So we've now covered all the questions that this group has prepared for you, Sheila, and now we have some time for those here in this meeting to ask you any follow-up questions from what we've heard so far. So for those in the audience, you can type your question in the chat. You can wave or just unmute if you wish, wave at the camera, I'll open your microphone. So we've dedicated about 15 minutes of time for this space. And if we do run out of time, I'll ask you to hold any remaining questions, and then Ms. Webb can tell us in her closing statement the best way to reach out and continue these conversations outside of our meeting today. So far, I don't see any questions in the chat just yet. Would anyone like to unmute and ask? Oh, Anne.
Hi, Sheila. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for talking with us tonight. It's really good to hear your perspective on everything. And I guess my question is, I'm wondering what your experiences have been in the community in the 6 years that you lived here, and how you think that personal experience being you know, a Black woman in a community, like you said, with all white men on the city council, white man as a mayor, you know, how your personal experience has kind of influenced your platform and what you'd like to do.
Well, I can say this, being on the Human Rights Commission for 5 years, I've never met any of the council in person, or the city manager, until we started doing this work most recently around the murder of George Floyd. And so that has not been a relationship at all. And I think if you're working under the umbrella of a city, the city leaders should at least have some type of engagement with a group of people that are volunteering for their city for the best interest of humanity. And so I've never had that that experience of meeting them face to face, one-on-one. So to me, that says a lot. Also, just I've patronized some businesses where I've patronized one business, I shouldn't say businesses, where my husband and I were not treated well, and we left. And so that's not something that commonly happens, but it happens. I'm not going to patronize a business that's not respectful to me. Yeah. So, you know, and then just hearing my friends and associates talk about their experience, their fear, maybe not even an experience, but fear of driving down 81, coming through Robbinsdale. I know for myself, I've been followed by the police, not most recently, but when we first moved here, and I assume that they kept going because I was a block away from my house, and once they typed in the information, they realized that, but it felt like profiling. And so that's a common thing for Black people, and it's common for people. It's a common experience for Black people as passerbys in Robbinsdale. That has been the feedback that I've listened to for over 30 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Nick, I saw your hand. I want to just briefly mention in the chat, Patty says, so happy you have come along, finally somebody to open up these communities' minds. And Holly M has a question, and then after this we'll go to Nick. So Holly's question for Sheila, what are you most proud of in your professional career, and how will that influence you?
Holly, you're gonna make me cry. What I'm most proud of, oh my God, now I'm getting emotional. Just this past February, Black History Month, I hosted a celebration of Black women and Black girls. So I celebrated, we put a collage up of Black women, Black females that we love, celebrities, dancers, entertainers, in the hallway of our building right near the main office. But our assembly, we had a procession of every Black girl in our school proceeded into the assembly at the beginning of the event. And I was most proud because Black women and Black girls don't always get that recognition. And I can't tell you the number of girls that were just delighted to be recognized, and parents. And so that was probably one of the most spirited things I've done in my career. It touched my heart. A lot of things touched my heart because I have a soft heart, but it did, because like I said, you don't get that recognition, and to have only 1 month to celebrate your heritage when you have to walk in line of other people's rules and regulations that don't always fit who you are, you know, and to be in a space most times where you are invisible, where you're not valued, where you're not important, where you're not the person that is defined as beauty or beautiful. So it was great giving that honor to not only the teachers and staff, but the students.
That's wonderful, thank you. And thank you, Holly, that was an excellent question. Nick, I know you had your hand up earlier. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so hey Sheila, a lot of your platform is around kind of engagement, community engagement, and getting people to the table. And I'm wondering if you can explain, how do you incentivize the community to come out? What kind of events, what kind of, like, how do we get that? Because it's one thing to say it, and sometimes it's a little bit harder to actually get people to be as excited as it feels like so few people are excited to be engaged in local government.
Yes, I think it's going to take some hard work. It's going to take some work. When people have been absent, they have fears and reserves around coming out. But I'm committed to this work. This is work I've been doing. I'm committed to having people's voices heard, having people come to the table. I think outreach, having groups like yourself support that mission and goal. I see myself working with this group and groups like this to engage and close that bridge and those gaps. I can't do this work alone. No one person can do that alone. I'm not going to sit here and act like, oh, I have all the answers and I'm going to come in and I'm going to do this work and watch me. Watch us. It's going to take, it's definitely going to take a village. And it's going to take everybody on city council, the mayor, the city manager, people that are making decisions, planning committee, we all have to get involved. We all have to commit to this. We're saying we're involved. We say this is what we want right now during election season. Everyone is saying this is what they want, right? This is what you're hearing. We have to hold them to that as well. Not just me, but everyone who has spoken anything about they want equity, inclusion, and change. They need to be on the diversity, equity, and inclusion change mission and help set goals and visions around getting that done. I'm all for it. I'm on board. I'm ready. I'm excited. You know, it needs to be done. So I hope I answered the question, but I think just getting out there, thank you. Just getting out there, doing the work, you know, going places we haven't been before, you know, inviting, engaging, and having communities that have not been included be a part of Whiz Bang and the meet and greet. Adding diversity to those events as well, you know, and us celebrating Juneteenth. And us celebrating Cinco de Mayo. You know, we need to be celebrating other people, other groups. We just can't be we just can't be okay with the old way of doing things, not in the new day and time.
Great, thank you. I don't know if you can see Sheila, but you're getting thumbs up from the audience. So yes, thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Again, I don't see anything newer in the chat. Feel free to unmute, or if you want to turn on your camera and just wave at me. Is that a wave, Holly? I'll unmute you here. Oh, did that work? Let me try again.
Sorry, I think
There
I
you
had
go.
to hit. You guys can hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Since there wasn't a question quickly, I wanted to know if Keith had a question for Sheila. Since I see he's here. Keith.
I'm going to plead the fifth.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to bring,
No, I'm kidding. I'm just
bring
kidding.
some light.
Kidding.
You can mute me again.
No,
Okay, thank you. I did see Keith is in the group. Yes, he's in the crowd.
did he have a question?
Questions?
No, he didn't have a question.
Keith, do you have a question? Thank you. Let's see. Yes, there is a question in the chat from Keith. What methods would you use to keep your ward informed? Well, that's a good question.
I would love to have ward meetings. Like, I would love to have meetings that, besides the council meeting, that just would be with my ward, talking about Ward 2 issues, things that are going on in Ward 2, whatever ideas people have from this ward, and bring them back, and maybe just have a discussion about it. But I would love to have a ward meeting. I don't know if it would be monthly, quarterly, but I think it's important that I have my own personal engagement, intimate engagement with the ward, and get to know the community of Ward 2, and hear directly what's going on, what's exciting, what's troubling people, you know, just hear demands and suggestions and get comments and feedback, so that, you know, some of that stuff might be things that people just want to talk about, and it could be things that could happen within the community, and some of them might warrant being taken to the council table. So I would love, that's something I'd really love to have.
That's great. I love that idea. Okay, any other questions? Anne, is that a wave? Can I unmute you again?
If we have time for it, is there?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm curious, Sheila, with your experience working in schools as a social worker, with your experience raising kids in Robbinsdale, what do you think it is from that part of our community, the kids in our community, that maybe the needs that aren't met or areas we could do better for them?
So I'm not raising kids in Robbinsdale. We have our grandkids ambushing our home here and there, but they don't go to school here. But we do, as an extended family, we do help raise them. I think what we do, like I said prior, we have in Robbinsdale, and I think that because Keith actually works in the Robbinsdale School District, but I'm thinking there are only 2 schools in Robbinsdale that are part of the Robbinsdale School District, and I think that's Lakeview and Robbinsdale Middle. I'm thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we need to be more supportive. We need to have more of a presence. I would love for our city leaders to be at some of the board meetings, to be representing Lakeview and Robbinsdale Middle School, to go up there and have relationships with the principals and the social workers to find out how can we extend what they're doing in the schools around equity, inclusion, and diversity and bring it back to our community. You know, what kind of tools are they using? Who are they using? You know, what kind of partnerships do they have that can extend into our community and that we can have to keep building on that education that they're presenting to our students? So I would love that. I would love for us to be more involved, you know. And that's another thing. We can't just do the work and be okay with us doing the work. We also have to educate our children. And if someone else is educating them, we should be a part of that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Anne. Great question. I'll mute you now. Okay, I do want to highlight one other comment from Jenna. Jenna says, hey there, social worker to social worker. I'm just really glad you're here. And then Kristen chimed in, Noble has at least 1/3 of the student population from Robbinsdale. Ah, that is interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see any other hands or questions or waving or anything in the chat. So I think we will begin to wrap up our meeting. So we'll bring our meeting to a close and ask Sheila for a brief closing statement. And Sheila, could you also tell us the best way to find you online and the best way to, like I said, continue these conversations outside of this meeting?
Yes, you can, first of all, you can call me at 612-460-7540. My webpage is Webb, all lowercase, Webb for Ward 2, and that's the number 2.com. The email address is Webb for Ward 2. The W is uppercase, the F is uppercase, and the other W is uppercase. Webb for Ward 2 at gmail.com. I need a simpler URL for my Facebook, so I won't display that here, but the web page, you can go on Facebook. You'll see me, it's Sheila Webb. I'm on Facebook. The phone number, the email, the web page. Yes.
Great. And could you also just give us a brief closing statement if you have one?
Yes, I do. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me. I think this group is important. I think you won't even understand the impact you have on this community probably for years to come. And I'm putting that into existence because I want this to be long-term and not short-term. What I will tell you is I think as new allies to this work, I would suggest you looking up the history of white allies and finding, looking up people who did this work that you're doing right now, and seeing who has values and morals aligned with your purpose for being involved in this, and that will just give you more purpose to continue this work. I want this to be, I want this to sustain. And so I really appreciate you guys stepping out, taking risks, and doing this work. That's first and foremost. I also want to say that if you believe in equity and equality and diversity, if you believe in humanity over everything, then I'm the person that you want to be leading your ward. And I hope that I get your vote August 11th, Webb for Ward 2. I'm a person for humanity. I love humanity, and I think that's important. If we could just stop, pause, and just think of humankind, I think we can rid of so much of this pain that we cause upon one another.
Thank you so much. We are so grateful to connect with you today. So thank you all for attending. We'll close our meeting. And again, thank you, Ms. Webb, for your time with us today. Just a reminder, everyone, please share your register to vote and vote early by mail. Be sure your ballot is postmarked by August 11th. If you do vote in person on 11th, be sure to wear your mask and practice social distancing. Thank you again, Sheila. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night. We appreciate you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.